say that you've got people on the top and you've got people that are, being caught between the top and the bottom, which is where we find ourselves in right now. Which leads me to our featured story, and this is maybe, the future for all of us, as this is the case. This is this woman in Indianapolis, and this is a story that nobody talked about. Didn't get picked up by any mainstream media outlet. I didn't see it from a verified checkmark on Twitter. I didn't see it on the For You page, or not the For You page, I guess on Twitter Moments, right? But I didn't see this anywhere. It got sent to me by a few different fans of the show. And our featured story tonight is about a woman in Indianapolis who was shot and killed by a few black guys because she had the audacity to say, "All lives matter." And I'll read you, this is a report from a local source. It says, quote, "An Indianapolis mother was shot and killed along the canal early Sunday, marking the second homicide on the canal in a week. According to the victim's family, the shooting started with an argument over Black Lives Matter and language. Eventually, the two sides separated and walked away from each other until witnesses claimed the killer opened fire from a nearby bridge and ran away. This is according to the victim's fiance. He said, quote, "It was squashed and they went up the hill and left, we thought. But they were sitting on St. Clair waiting for us to come under the bridge, and that's when she got shot." The fiance admits that he returned fire, but he didn't hit anyone. He says Jessica Doty Whitaker, which is her name, leaves behind a little boy. He says, quote, "She shouldn't have lost her life. She's got a 3-year-old son. She loved him dearly." Her grandfather posted on Facebook that the altercation started because she said that all lives matter. Conveniently, they have no suspects. They don't know who shot her. They just know that it was a few blacks. But this is the future of the country. And it's not just the future of the country insofar as there's violence against white people. It's the future of the country because nobody's talking about it. And a lot of people wonder how you connect all the dots when it comes to some of these big issues, like immigration, race, things like South Africa and free speech and the billionaire class. But this is how it all comes together. This is the synthesis. You have got multiracialism in this country. It's being exacerbated by immigration. As we talked about earlier with Eric Weinstein, you've got many distinct nations living within this country, and they see themselves as distinct, and they are distinct. And, you could say whatever you want about that, but that's the reality. That's why we see Black Lives Matter. That's why we see La Raza. That's why we saw Indian opposition to the Mount Rushmore speech 2 weeks ago. That's why we see Eric Weinstein and Ben Shapiro and all these other characters. You've got a country with many different nations living within it, competing for the same resources from the government and from the private sector, competing for the same jobs, living in the same neighborhoods, going to the same schools and the same workplaces. They have got different cultures, different religions, different languages, different mannerisms, different senses of humor, different attitudes, different political ideas. They're different. The differences are significant. And because they're significant, it leads to friction and conflict. This is where we are. Immigration exacerbates that. You've already got multiracialism in America in 1960, but this amounts to 90% white people and 10% black people. That was the demographics in the 1960s. Mass immigration from the third world makes it such that whites are now 60% of the population, blacks 13%. I think Hispanics are somewhere around 15 or 20% at this point. Asians make up the difference. It's exacerbated the differences, created more nations, grown them, made them such that they will not assimilate because they're too big to assimilate if they even could in the first place. You've got billionaires subsidizing all of this who will be there to reap the profits of it in the form of cheap labor and an easily governable populace because there's constant conflict. And this is where we come in with this woman here, Jessica Doty Whitaker, which is to say that all of these changes will inevitably result in white people being targeted and victimized. You cannot tell the population for 30 years that whites are the problem. Whites were the colonists. Whites genocided everybody. Whites enslaved everybody. Whites were racist against everybody. Whites oppressed everybody. They're the source of all the misery in the country. Create a second-class citizen tier system, and then have the country become majority minority and expect that whites will not be targeted for this. And this is what you're seeing. In the aftermath of Black Lives Matter, we see very clearly that there are penalties for whites that speak out. Whites that don't agree with this are fired. Whites that don't agree with this are charged for crimes. They're attacked. In some cases now, they're even murdered. And the perpetrators of these crimes and many other crimes are not caught. They're not arrested. In the cases of deplatforming or canceling, they're not even committing crimes. This behavior is tolerated and encouraged. The final phase of this is where social media censorship comes in, which is to say that this is the reality we live in right now. We've gotten to this point where white people are living in fear in their own land. They're being targeted with impunity. And now, nobody will be there to talk about it. Because the only way that you would hear about this story, the only way that you would hear about what caused this murder, is because somebody posted about it on Facebook. Nobody would have even reported, for example, that this altercation occurred because she said all lives matter. The press didn't even report that. We know that because her grandfather posted about it on Facebook. Local media reported on it, and some right-wing accounts picked it up on Twitter and YouTube and elsewhere. But if it weren't for that initial Facebook post, if it weren't for social media, nobody would even know about the story. Nobody would have even bothered to report about it because it was a white victim. It was a racial hate crime, and it was committed by non-whites against whites. So nobody in the mainstream media reported on it. The only people that saw fit to talk about it, to report it, to comment on it, were right-wing activists on social media. And the way that we're headed, the trajectory that we're on, is that nobody like that will be left on the internet. Nobody like that has ever been in legacy media, which is print, television, and radio. And pretty soon, nobody will be like that on social media. And that's Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and you name it, every other application. Nobody will be left to even talk about what's happening. And that leads to the inevitable result of all of this, of multiracialism, mass immigration, billionaire elites financing it, and social media censorship silencing it, which is total annihilation. Once this begins to happen, there's really no limiting principle. What will intervene? What force, what power, what actor, short of God, and that might be possible, but what and who or what organization will intervene to stop what is coming? You have got George Soros talking about investing $220 million into Black Lives Matter. This organization that wants to disband and defund the police, that wants reparations, that wants systemic reform. They say we're not in favor of incrementalism. It's now possible to achieve whole-scale reform in a matter of years, in a matter of a few years, not decades, not centuries, but in a matter of years. Who is going to intervene to stop that? Who is even going to talk about it or report about it? Nobody's even going to know about it. That is the end game until we see a country like South Africa or Zimbabwe, a story which has been told a few times in the history of the world, where we become the hated minority, and then people will really start to go after us like it's open season. If you thought we're losing our country now, give it 5 years. And you might be the next Jessica Doty Whitaker. You or your wife or your kids or one of your family members or your neighbor or a friend, any one of us could turn into that. When you're driving downtown, for example, and something like that happens in any major city, if you're those people in St. Louis who brandish their firearms outside their house, if you're the people that painted over the BLM mural, if you're somebody defending your storefront from looters, if you're somebody that happens to just be driving down the highway when Black Lives Matter is demonstrating, or you're just walking home one night along the canal and you get into an argument, you're not safe. The people that hurt you will not be penalized, and nobody will talk about it when you die. And you probably won't even have a funeral because of the pandemic. And this is the state of the country. This is the state of all these different problems. And an America First agenda, an America First movement that doesn't talk about that is useless. A conservative movement, a nationalist movement that doesn't talk about that is useless. And that's where we are. I'm done talking about how, the left is hypocritical. Because this is the only thing that conservatives know how to say. This is the only appeal that conservatives can make to their voters or their constituents or their listeners or whoever. It's two things. It's the left is hypocritical, or, the left is not left enough. They'll say, well, look how the left isn't living up to their own standards. Or, here's how the right is actually more left than the left. Here's Donald Trump is a homophobe. Well, look at how he just appointed Richard Grenell. These are the two appeals that I hear. And then all kinds of other nonsense kind of sprinkled in with that. Takes about socialism, or takes about individualism, or the Constitution, or the American Creed, or whatever. How can you ignore what's happening? It's all explained right here. George Soros, Open Society Foundation, saying race, identity, and culture is not going away. It is becoming the explicit focal point of politics. Based on that, we're going to give $220 million to radicals that talk about how whites are subhuman, whites are evil, whites cannot govern the South. That's what Stacey Abrams said. You could go down the list. We're going to fundamentally transform America. We're going to make wholesale systemic reform instead of incremental reform. And this is what they're saying with their money and with their numbers, with their manpower. And this is what they're doing. And nobody will be around to even talk about it pretty soon. And that's why people got to start to wake up. Because really it's a matter of time before we can't wake up much more people than we've already woken up, so to speak. Because this channel will be gone. Channels like this and other channels of information that are similar will be scrubbed and wiped from the internet. They'll go back even in the Wayback Machine and archive and libraries and everywhere where this information exists. And it'll be wiped out. And then at that point, it's, it's really just down to you. At that point, it's really just you and whatever you've got against this system that's being created. This system of the top and the underclass, the elites and the underclass working together to annihilate the middle. And we know who that is. It's not to say that it's all white people. It's mostly white people. I'm sure they'll maybe get Kanye West, and they'll maybe get a few others. Maybe they'll get Darren Beatty or something like that. But we know that this is something primarily affecting the historic American nation. It's people that hate America. America is a European Christian nation. That is what they hate. And the same thing is happening all over the rest of European civilization. But that's not for this show. This show's America First. So, I look at these stories and, we could take them day by day and we could say, wow, Antifa sure is crazy. Wow, Black Lives Matter. What will they think of next? This is really unfair. But at a certain point, somebody's got to string all this together and tell you the big picture, tell you the significance of all of this. I see this murder. And yes, of course, the people that killed this woman will get away with it. Of course, the media won't cover it. And that's not left-wing hypocrisy. That's not a left-wing double standard. That's not something that is unjust. That if you say that it's that, it'll fall on deaf ears. It is part of a coordinated agenda. It is part of a very big picture and long-term plan, which a lot of white people refuse to acknowledge. We are going along to the slaughter. And whether it's Joe Biden up next or whichever Democratic president is up next, they open the floodgates to mass immigration. They open up the floodgates to voter fraud, mail-in ballots, felons voting, no voter ID, direct democracy, right? No electoral college. Do away with some of the other regulations. And you have got permanent rule by an anti-white party. And they will soon make this an anti-white and a non-white country. And that's just the way it is. And I wish I could tell you it's not that way. I wish it wasn't that way. But that's what it is. And tell me I'm wrong. Did George Soros say he's investing $200 million to create socialism? Is he investing $200 million in DSA? Is he investing $200 million in, Dinesh D'Souza might claim that he's investing $200 million in the alt-right or the KKK. No, he's investing it in Black Lives Matter. And we know what they're about. We've seen it with our eyes, what they're about for the past few months. And they can obfuscate, and they can get on TV and sometimes try to moderate their positions for prime time, but we know what they're about. We see what they're about. They're not even hiding it anymore. And it's time for us to listen to them when they say what they're about. Many people will not do that. So that is Jessica Doty Whittaker. Just another white name that doesn't matter. Another white life that doesn't matter. Remember, only black people matter. Black people matter. Black lives matter. Black people matter. Hispanic people matter. Jewish people matter. White people do not matter in this country. It's dehumanization. It's segregation. It's discrimination. It's prejudice. And ultimately, what does that lead to? What do they tell us about this day in and day out? It leads to genocide. And that's where we're headed.